Today is day 400. Day 400 of what, Liz? Day 400 since the day that now former Attorney General Pam Bondi handed those of us who had been invited to the White House last February 27th the infamous white Epstein binders. Well, 400 days later, President Trump finally gives Attorney General Pam Bondi the boot. This is what he posted on Truth Social this morning. And by the way, thank you all for bearing with me as we go live for this quote unquote emergency live late at night. Let's just say Holy Thursday Mass is about 5 hours long. Beautiful service. Highly recommend going. They do the foot washing. It's obviously the institution of the Eucharist and the priesthood. You don't want to miss it, but it's a long one. So we're going live after that. President Trump posted this morning announcing, or this afternoon, I should say, announcing that he was firing Attorney General Pam Bondi. This is what he said. He said, Pam Bondi is a great American patriot and a loyal friend who faithfully served as my Attorney General over the past year. Pam did a tremendous job overseeing a massive crackdown in crime across our country, with murders plummeting to their lowest level since 1900. We love Pam, and she will be transitioning to a much needed and important new job in the private sector to be announced at a date in the near future. And our Deputy Attorney General and a very talented and respected legal mind, Todd Blanche, will step in to serve as acting Attorney General. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Now, what prompted this? You might ask, 400 days after Pam Bondi handed those of us who were invited to the White House those infamous white Epstein binders. What prompted President Trump to fire Pam Bondi today? Well, there's a rumor, and I don't totally buy into this rumor, by the way, and I'll tell you why in just a second. There is a rumor. It actually comes in the form of a report by the Daily Mail, but I don't think it's substantiated enough to be an actual report. The Daily Mail reports that, and this is, I'm going to just quote them here. Trump's reasoning for the sudden dismissal comes in part because the president believes that Bondi tipped off Eric Swalwell about the FBI's efforts to release investigative documents related to his relationship with an alleged Chinese spy. The FBI was preparing a cache of documents on Swalwell's relationship with Christine Fang. She's intervening in these matters. The White House wasn't pleased she was intervening due to her personal friendship with Swalwell, the source added. The Daily Mail continued, it's unclear why Bondi would have intervened, but it is believed that Bondi and Swalwell have a friendly relationship. Swalwell has openly criticized her since she took the Attorney General position after failing to prosecute multiple death threats against him and his family. That's the report, and it went viral. I have to tell you, I don't quite buy that. And there's someone else who doesn't buy that. Mark Caputo, who is usually correct about this type of report, says that that report is not true. And I hope it's not true, actually, as funny as it would be in a sense, that after everything that Pam Bondi did, if that were the reason because she leaked Derek Swalwell, if that were the reason that Trump kicked her out, I would much prefer the reason that Pam Bondi lost her position be because she deserved to lose her position. And that is what Mark Caputo and other sources confirm is actually the case, that Pam Bondi was fired because Donald Trump was essentially, counting the days. The clock is ticking. How many days do we have left of this Trump administration? And who has Pam Bondi indicted? She is supposed to be a pursuer of justice. And was she? This is the way that I look at it. Pam Bondi has been Attorney General until this afternoon for 14 months. 14 precious months. How many months does a president get in the Oval Office? How many months does a president get as commander-in-chief, as chief executive? 48 total in a term. Pam Bondi wasted almost 30% of President Trump's total administration refusing to prosecute the crimes committed against us, against you and against me. 14 months, what has she done? Dr. Fauci lied to the Senate, to Senator Rand Paul to be specific, during COVID. In addition to just abusing his position in government, was he prosecuted for that? Not by Pam Bondi. What about Russiagate? Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, gave Pam Bondi on a silver platter, basically tied with a red bow, an indictment for John Brennan. because Obama and Obama's cronies manufactured a fake intelligence assessment, falsely accusing President Trump of colluding with Russia to win the 2016 election. They made it up. They committed crimes. Tulsi Gabbard gave Pam Bondi proof of that, and we'll see what's to come out of Florida. But it's not thanks to Pam Bondi. What about the Ukraine impeachment? Nothing from Pam Bondi. The FBI or agents at the FBI, you can look at the FBI holistically. You can look at it by district office. You can look at it by agent if you want. There were agents at the FBI who targeted parents, the parents of school children to be specific, because those parents did not want their children being indoctrinated with critical race theory in school. The FBI targeted Project Veritas journalists who had the audacity to investigate Ashley Biden's diary. They later decided, by the way, not to publish it, even though it ultimately turned out to be true and accurate. The FBI raided their apartments and handcuffed them at the crack of dawn, dragged them through years of abuse because the process is the punishment. Did Pam Bondi hold those FBI agents accountable? No, she didn't. What about the FBI labeling Catholics as extremists? No accountability. What about January 6th? Do you remember January 6th, the Fedsurrection? And the due process violations? No indictments from Pam Bondi. What about when government and big tech they colluded to censor us? And there's proof of that because the Twitter files that Elon Musk released right after he bought Twitter, before he renamed it X, revealed to us that government officials were colluding with big tech to censor us from talking about transgenderism and COVID and vaccines on January 6th. That is against the law. What about the raid on Mar-a-Lago? What about all the abuse that happened at the NGOs that was exposed by Doge? What about Antifa? I thought they were a domestic terror group. What about all these other violent left-wing transgender groups? What about Roy Singham, the American billionaire who acts as a mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, who sends his money to fund left-wing violent riots in the United States? What about all the lawfare against President Trump himself by Alvin Bragg and Fani Willis and Letitia James? What about Ilhan Omar and her naturalization fraud? Zohran Mamdani and his naturalization fraud? And don't even get me started on the Epstein files. 14 precious months. And what does she have to show for it? Listen, the American people voted for President Trump. I said this after the Epstein files happened, and I will say it again. The American people voted for President Trump because we want justice. We want justice. And Attorney General Pam Bondi prosecuted 0 of the big abuses against us. 0. And we were in a position, we were in a place where we would have been very willing to be generous. You get just one of those and nail them to the wall, and we'll be your biggest cheerleaders. But not even one. Instead, what did Pam Bondi do? She spent her time on Fox News because she wants to be a TV star. She lied repeatedly about the Epstein files, even though she had not read the actual files, even though she was talking about them publicly, but didn't know what was in them. Because she's click thirsty. She craves attention and adulation. Pam Bondi deserved to be fired 400 days ago. The day that she handed us those infamous white Epstein binders with the cover sheet that she bragged to me personally while I was in the White House walking to the Oval Office with her. Side by side, she bragged to me about making that cover sheet herself. The cover sheet that read, Phase 1, the most transparent administration in history. Which, of course, was all a lie that she invented to make herself famous, because those binders contained, as you know, I don't need to tell you this, nothing new, despite her false promise that she had the Epstein client list on her desk. No, she didn't. She just wanted a headline. President Trump's base has been disgusted with Pam Bondi since that moment because, this is very important, because the Epstein files represent justice to the base. The justice that we voted for when we voted for President Trump. Justice for all of the abuse that was inflicted upon us during the Biden administration. Pam Bondi's lies and her false promises destroyed trust and undermined justice, and it was all a self-inflicted wound. It didn't have to happen. And here's the part that infuriates Trump's base. It cost Trump the goodwill of his own base. Even though the actions, the self-inflicted wound came from Bondi, And since that moment, Pam Bondi has been a liability to his administration. 400 days, 14 months total that Pam Bondi has been in office have now passed. Wasted. 30% of this valuable allotment that the voters gave to Donald Trump gone. Thanks to Pam Bondi refusing to prosecute the crimes committed against us by Democrats and deep state swamp creatures. It's sad, actually. Incompetence is one thing, but what Pam Bondi did as Attorney General is a pathetic surrender of her historic opportunity to enact justice. She threw it away. Listen, I am deeply grateful that President Trump understands the urgency that we face today. You feel it. I feel it. If we don't root out the corruption that exists in the bowels of our government, if we do not prosecute the criminals, not just say, let bygones be bygones, let's let that go in the past. If we do not prosecute the criminals that committed those crimes, and then reclaim and restructure the deep state so the abuse can never happen again, then it will. We can't live facing the reality that we will not be abused if Republicans are in office, and we will be abused if Democrats are in office. It can't just be a matter of when the leadership changes, our lot in life changes. That's why you have to root out the corruption, why it's not a victory in and of itself. Well, it is a victory in and of itself, but it's not a victory over corruption just to emerge victorious from the election. You have to change the structure of the deep state so that there's no place for deep state swamp creatures once Democrats get power again. As we sit here at this moment, we have less than 3 years left. The clock is ticking to protect ourselves and our families from the abuse the Democrats are already threatening. The Democrats tell us what they're going to do. On the Breakfast Club, you have a prominent leftist commentator, Charlemagne, talk about the demagnification of America, likening it to the denazification of Germany. He wants anybody associated with Trump to be prosecuted for the mere association of wanting to make America great again. You have a sitting politician, a Democrat, Pritzker, promising the same thing. Indictments against what? People that want a secure border, that want deportations of criminal aliens and aliens who are criminal because they came here in violation of our law. You have Democrat strategists like James Carville talking about how it's going to feel like Mike Tyson hit the Trump family in the face. That even after the midterms, not just post 2028, after the midterm elections this year, President Trump's family and their spouses are going to be prosecuted. So from all corners of the Democrat apparatus, the commentators, the elected politicians, and the policy strategists are all telling you the same thing. They're telling you what the Democrats are going to do as soon as the Democrats are able to. Again, I am deeply grateful that President Trump understands the urgency that we face. And I want to thank you, Mr. President, for always listening to your base. Without justice for the crimes committed against you and against us, because of this America First agenda that we share, without justice, we cannot make America great again. Unless, by the way, let me just make a little note here. Lest anyone consider this analysis to be some personal animosity against Pam Bondi, it is not. I have none. I assure you that the next Attorney General will be held to this very same standard. Will the next Attorney General prosecute the crimes against us, as we detailed a moment ago, or not? It shouldn't even be a question. This is what Pam Bondi said in response to being fired by President Trump. She said, over the next month, I will be working tirelessly to transition the office of Attorney General to the amazing Todd Blanche before moving to an important private sector role I am thrilled about and where I will continue fighting for President Trump and his administration. Leading President Trump's historic and highly successful efforts to make America safer and more secure has been the honor of a lifetime and easily the most consequential first year of the Department of Justice in American history. Since February 2025, we've secured the lowest murder rate in 125 years, secured first ever terrorism convictions against members of Antifa, shattered domestic and transnational gangs across the country, taken custody of more than 90 key cartel figures, and won 24 favorable rulings at the Supreme Court. I remain eternally grateful for the trust that President Trump placed in me to make America safe again. End quote. Now, as you know, two things can be true at once. The crime rate is down, and part of that is due to the Department of Justice, but it's a little bit like patting someone on the back for acknowledging that a boy can only be a boy and can't be a girl. Yes, it's good to reclaim that when the left has tried to obliterate objective truth, but should you really be praised for doing the right thing? You can encourage someone for doing the right thing and recognize it. But that's the baseline role of the Department of Justice. Without achieving what she achieved, you would be grossly negligent, which is what attorneys general prior to her during the Biden administration were. And it's not that high of a bar to do better than Merrick Garland. So who's next? Who's next? President Trump said Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is now acting Attorney General. What does that mean? Does that mean that he's testing him out for the role, or that he's just going to take his time for a minute, take a breath, properly vet a candidate to serve as the next Attorney General, because this candidate needs to be the right person? There's a lot of names. A lot of people want this position. It's a hard job. A lot of people in Washington, D.C. want to be the Attorney General. And there are already a lot of names being floated. And I don't know if all of these people want this job or not. These are the names being floated, but there are a lot more who are vying for the position behind the scenes. Senator Mike Lee's name has been floated. Deputy Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, Harmeet Dillon's name has been floated. Governor Ron DeSantis' name has been floated. Senator Ashley Moody's name has been floated. Lee Zeldin and Eric Schmidt are reportedly the front runner. Lee Zeldin right now is the EPA administrator. And Eric Schmidt, as you remember, is the senator from Missouri who was previously the state attorney general there, who did very good work as attorney general. So who would be good at this role? Who would be good at this role? Well, I'll tell you, we are going to do a deep dive on the front runner candidates, what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, maybe even what their vulnerabilities are, at the beginning of next week, probably Monday's episode. So make sure you tune in to that, because we're not going to sit here and suffer 400 more days of what we just suffered. 30% of the Trump administration is gone. We have limited time left to get this stuff done, and it has to be the right person. And by the way, if it is the right person, everything that we have been observing about Pam Bondi will become obvious, because with the right attorney general, within the first days, weeks, months in office, you will see a spate of indictments, investigations into crimes committed against us, against you and me. And it will show you that this argument, I have never bought this argument. This argument is made by some people, some legal commentators who I respect. I don't agree with this take, though. There is an argument that the reason Attorney General Pam Bondi did not prosecute any of the big issues is because the legal system is simply set up in a way. It's the process and the procedures that hampered her. It's the activist judges that stood in her way. And she simply, the courts in D.C., the jury pool in D.C., including grand juries, was just made it impossible for her to get anything done because she was stymied every way she turned. And I just don't buy that argument. It's not that there's not activist judges, there are. It's not that DC has an objectively neutral, fair jury pool. They don't. But where there's a will, there's a way. And to not even try to bring criminals to justice because you think a Democrat might try to stop you does not a good attorney general make. Chip Roy had an interesting observation. I'm going to show you this video because I think that Congressman Roy, he's currently running, by the way, for attorney general of the state of Texas. He had an interesting observation to make about what the next attorney general needs to be. Take a look at this. We're going to play this in just a second. We're going to bring up this video of Congressman. There we go. This is Congressman Chip Roy.
Congressman, appreciate you joining us. What is your reaction to this news?
Well, great to be on. You know, this is an agency that is near and dear to my heart as a former assistant United States attorney. It's critical that we have a great leader at the top of the Department of Justice. Obviously, we thank Pam for her service. And she's, served the administration for this first 15 months. But the next person who's heading the Department of Justice has got to be aggressive. We have a limited period right now with President Trump in the White House, with House Republicans and Senate Republicans. We have got to be on offense for a justice and accountability. I have people that I represent, J6ers, people that are looking at what are we doing about Antifa and what they're doing radically across this country to endanger us, open borders, the radical Marxist networks. We referred John Brennan to the Department of Justice. The Judiciary Committee did under the leadership of Jim Jordan. We've got so many things we need to be doing and pursuing. Arctic frost. I mean, how many things do we have to see before we see some heads roll and we see some accountability? Everybody I talk to at home in Texas wants to see action on the Epstein files. They want to see action. They want to see prosecutions. And that is, I think, what the most important thing for the new head of the Department of Justice is. We want to see action and accountability.
That's right. That's right. Everything he said. Speaking our language, we feel this urgency. And it's not fake urgency. This is a rational, valid, real urgency facing us. What's going to happen if the Trump administration comes to a close at the end, or technically the beginning of 2029, and we haven't rooted out the swamp creatures? These people that committed crimes against us haven't been held accountable. What's going to happen? Well, you know what's going to happen. Free speech is going to be curtailed. Religious liberty is going to come under attack. The family unit is going to take abuse like we've never seen before. We don't have that luxury. I wish we did. It would make politics a lot easier, more fun, a casual hobby versus a deadly serious existential fight. I wrote a line in my book that was published almost 3 years ago, my most recent book. And it's my favorite line of the entire book. I wrote, if we refuse to acknowledge the reality of the political enemy that we face, then we won't defeat them. It is a chronic problem on our side of the aisle that we don't want to acknowledge what we're facing, because it changes what politics is. It changes how significant political battles are. And that's true here. Again, it's why I'm very grateful to President Trump for doing this. As funny as the story from the Daily Mail is, because wouldn't that be a hoot if Pam Bondi, after all she's done, she botched up the Epstein files, cost Trump incredible political capital with his own base, didn't prosecute any of the big stuff that she was literally nominated and confirmed to prosecute. And then the reason that she got fired was because she told like the lamest, loserest friend on earth that he was under FBI investigation for banging Fang Fang. That would be, I mean, listen, wilder stories have happened in DC. People have gotten fired for a lot less, a lot wackier reasons. I hope it's not true. Because what I want to be true as I want the president to understand what we're feeling. And I know he listens to us. And I know he reacts to what's important to us and why what's important to us is important to us. But I want him to feel that urgency too. Because it's not just his legacy and whether his policies are reversed or whether they last, or even just a matter of the prosperity, the economic prosperity of our country. The very life of our country is on the line. That's going back to February 27th of 2025, that day at the White House. That's why people reacted the way that they did. That's why President Trump's base, that's why it's been the most viral story of the entire administration. The Epstein files, the binders. It's not just that people are interested in salacious political gossip or that it's such a disgusting, demented, evil series of crimes that Epstein committed and was seemingly orchestrating that people can't look away. It's not like they can't look away from an addicting true crime series. Part of it is that. Part of it is a sincere desire for justice in that case to be enacted. The idea that a rich man, because he's rich and has a talent for networking with other rich, influential, powerful, or political people, can commit sex crimes against minors and get away with it because he's rich and friends with influential, powerful, and political people is abhorrent. Part of the reason that we reacted so viscerally to Pam Bondi's binder stunt is because we don't feel like we've been told the truth about the entirety of the Epstein scandal, from how Epstein made his money to who Epstein was involved with in our government, in our intelligence communities, to intelligence communities abroad, whether that's the UK or France or Israel or Saudi Arabia or whatever. We don't feel like we've been told the truth because every time we are told something, it turns out, told something by a government official, I should say, it turns out not to be true because we, the people, use our journalistic skills and we uncover the truth ourselves, and it contradicts what we were told by the government. And then when Epstein died, mysteriously in prison, we weren't told the truth. Because every time there's been new Epstein files revealed, there's been some piece of information that either contradicts the narrative that we were told by the government or that was just not mentioned, just completely neglected, even though it seems a pivotal part of this story. And so when Pam Bondi gave us those binders and promised all the juicy stuff, that's what she told us behind the scenes, that the SDNY had millions of documents full of the juicy stuff and that the deep state was trying to hide it from her. People reacted viscerally because they didn't want, nobody wants that conspiracy to be true or any part of that conspiracy to be true. But even greater than that, this is like something that just compounds on itself, takes a life of its own. Not because people are looking for rage bait, not because people are looking for a reason to criticize the Trump administration. I said this before, I'll say it a million times. Anytime that I criticize or offer constructive criticism of the Trump administration, it's not to undercut them. It's not to give a narrative to the other side, to give them a tool to attack Trump, whom they hate. It's because I share the America First agenda with President Trump, and I want him to be as successful as possible as president. And when from the outside, I see something or someone who is a liability to President Trump, I want that problem addressed so that liability does not become an anchor holding back the success of the entire agenda. It's in Trump's own interest. I like to say a true friend tells the truth, even when the truth stings, or even when the truth has consequences for the person telling the truth. But a true friend actually tells the truth. And that's what we've been doing for 400 days to the Trump administration. We want the Trump administration to be successful, but people weren't just looking for a reason to be outraged. People, yes, obviously the internet always wants to be outraged about something, but you'll notice when whatever the outrage of the day is, typically it lasts about anywhere between 7 and 72 hours, and then it's done. 72 hours would actually be a fairly long lifespan for internet rage on a particular topic. Usually, if you just sit and watch it, people act like it's the biggest thing on earth, and then like 2 seconds later, they're on to something else. But not with the Epstein files. The Epstein files were different. 400 days later, it is still one of the biggest, not just political debacles, but it's still one of the things that hits people with almost the same visceral smack as it did that day 400 days ago. And it's not, again, it's not just because people were looking to criticize Trump, because this came from his own base. We like him. We like his administration. Nobody's perfect. Sure, everyone thinks that they would be a better president than the president because no one agrees with anyone else on everything. It's not just because there was an injustice in the Epstein case itself, which there has been, or a lack of transparency, which there has been, or corruption, which there obviously is. It's because of what it represented to us, what it still represents to us. This is, if you could go back 400 days, and in the wake, even assuming that Attorney General Pam Bondi made all of the stupid decisions that she made surrounding the Epstein files, from the binders to promising on Fox News that she had the client list, to then telling us in July that actually you aren't going to see anything else because what do you want, child sex abuse material anyway? Just thing after thing after thing, unforced error, just crazy behavior. Even if you assume, going back 400 days ago, that Pam Bondi makes the same series of asinine decisions surrounding Epstein, let me tell you this. President Trump's base would not actually still be as fixated on Epstein, the Epstein files, that case, the corruption, all of it, as we are if Pam Bondi had prosecuted any of the other big abuses. Because in that moment, in February of 2025, the Trump administration was brand new. Attorney General Pam Bondi was brand new. She was trying to make a splash. It was like the debut of her primetime show with the Epstein files. She wanted everyone in the world to see episode number 1. That's why she called it Phase 1. But people associated that with the reason that so many of us voted for Trump. We voted for Trump because we want justice. There was tremendous injustice during the Biden administration, not just the abuses of government that were illegal, but legal abuses of government, like the crime in our cities and the fentanyl trafficking and leaving our border open and inflation and all that money going to Ukraine. Biden inflicted abuse on us from every possible angle. And we were hungry for justice. And so when Pam Bondi began this saga with the Epstein files, we associated that with our pursuit of justice. We were stung when she lied to us, and we realized, there's just no escaping the fact that she lied. She said she had the Epstein files on her desk, and she didn't. She said there was going to be more juicy stuff, and there wasn't. She said, actually, there's nothing else for you to see, and then there was. She repeatedly, provably, demonstrably didn't tell us the truth. And we were stung because that's what we experienced under Biden. And if that had happened, if she had made the same series of decisions on Epstein, but also had brought James Comey and John Brennan and all the Russiagate plotters to justice, if she had rooted out who plotted January 6th and brought them to justice, if she had indicted Dr. Fauci for lying to Senator Rand Paul about gain-of-function research, which he knew he was funding. Fauci knew he was funding at NIH, and he knew it was illegal for him to be funding it, and he knew that he was funding it anyway, despite the fact that it was illegal. And then he lied to Rand Paul about it, pretending that he didn't do any of that, and he didn't know what Rand Paul was talking about. Demonstrable lie. If Pam Bondi had done any of that, then the association, the sort of single-minded association that President Trump's base has between the Epstein files and the idea of, are we going to see justice for these wrongdoings that were committed against us, or are we not? That would have been severed. And perhaps rightly so. But 14 months, 14 precious, valuable months. Every time I say that phrase, I hear in my mind this clock ticking. This clock ticking. You only have how many months left? How many months left? Now how many months left? How many days left? How many days left with a Republican Senate and a Republican House of Representatives? How much time? It's not much time. You're almost out of time. And what's going to happen when the clock stops? Today's so-called emergency episode, mostly named emergency episode because of the time that we are speaking with you, is sponsored by All Family Pharmacy. Listen, our healthcare system is broken and it's totally corrupt. I hate it. It's not built for you. It's built for insurance companies and corporate pharmacy chains and bureaucrats who are basically all patting each other on the back all the time. They think they should decide what you can access and what works for you. The good news is you can choose your doctor, of course, but you can also choose your pharmacy. Your pharmacy doesn't have to be broken and part of that corrupt system too. That's why I recommend you use All Family Pharmacy. They're an independent American pharmacy fixing what the system gets wrong. No insurance games, no middlemen, just real access to the medications that you and your doctor, not Fauci, decide that you need. They have antibiotics, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, mebendazole, plus 400 other medications for everyday needs. I'm talking blood pressure, cholesterol, thyroid, diabetes, whatever you need, they probably have it. The process is super simple. Just go online, fill out a short medical form, a licensed doctor reviews it, and if appropriate, your medications ship straight to your door. Here's my advice. Do not wait until you need something. Be prepared, because when someone in your family gets sick on a Sunday night or a holiday weekend, the last thing you want to be doing is scrambling for medication. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz10 for 10% off. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Use code Liz10 for 10% off. Take back control of your healthcare. Stop letting the system decide for you. This is kind of the theme of this entire show. The system is broken. We need to dismantle the system. Otherwise, it's going to continue to abuse us. It's going to continue to take advantage of us. 400 days, my friends. 400 days. It seems like a long time ago, and yet it seems like yesterday, because it should have been 399 days ago that Pam Bondi was fired. Maybe even 400. If I were President Trump, and this is not criticism, if I were President Trump, I probably would have fired Pam Bondi before we were all gone from the White House campus. It would not have taken long for that to happen. But think about this. We now have a historic opportunity to look forward. And I'm not trying to be poly-positive here. Again, Monday, we will be doing a deeper dive, or actually it'll be Tuesday. We have something else very special planned for you on Monday, which I forgot about until right now. You should make sure you subscribe, by the way, to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Liz Wheeler, and hit that bell, because when we go live on Monday, you're going to want to watch that. Tuesday, we will have for you a deeper dive into the different candidates who are currently under consideration by President Trump for Attorney General, because this has significant implications. And I know we've talked a lot about Pam Bondi and how she failed in her position, which is a fair conversation to have because the objective reality is she did. But we also have an opportunity now. We can sit here and we can talk about the urgency that we have, and that's real. We could talk about the 14 months, 30% of President Trump's term that has been wasted, at least from the perspective of the Department of Justice and the justice that the Department of Justice is supposed to pursue. But now it's like a gigantic reset button, not the kind that Hillary Clinton carries around in her purse, a real reset. We have an opportunity now. President Trump has an opportunity. And he knows this because he took it by firing Pam Bondi to actually pursue justice. And so that feeling that you felt on Election Day 2024, that I felt, that feeling, dare I call it hope, excitement, enthusiasm, on Inauguration Day, what were we chanting on this show? Perp walks and jumpsuits. Well, we're bringing that motto back. Perp walks and jumpsuits. Maybe we'll actually get that now that Pam Bondi is gone. If President Trump nominates the right person for this position. But just imagine for a moment. Imagine what you felt on that day, that Inauguration Day. Close your eyes. Imagine what you felt. You thought it was going to happen. You thought you were going to see Dr. Fauci served. Well, what if it does happen now? What if Dr. Fauci's horrible abuse and his lies are actually prosecuted? What if John Brennan and James Comey and Susan Rice and all of Obama's cronies who got together in that secret situation room meeting to plot how to take down Donald Trump with lies, and they weaponized the power of the federal government to do that? What if they are taken to court? What if we actually learn the names, the individuals? Listen, the FBI, we often talk about the FBI as this gigantic unit. And it makes it easy to forget that it's not actually a unit. That there are individual people making individual decisions at the FBI who should be held accountable for those decisions. It's not just the person at the top. Of course, you always, the buck stops here. That's any organization, whoever's running it, either administrating it or whoever's the chief executive of that organization, ultimately has responsibility for whatever anybody else does. But there's also the very real reality that it was somebody whose name we don't know, who said, go after the parents who are challenging school board members because the school board members want to trans their kids and want to tell them that if they're white, they're racist, and if they're black, they're oppressed. Somebody is at the FBI made that decision. Who was that? What if we find out now? What if the next attorney general goes back and looks at who made that decision, who had responsibility for that? What about the FBI agents who arrested the Project Veritas journalist? Who told them to do that? Who signed off on that? What if we learn the names of the deep state swamp creatures who weaponize the government to commit crimes against us because we didn't vote for Biden and we had the audacity to vote for Trump? What if we actually learn someone sat at a laptop or a desktop computer and typed out the memo that was supposed to remain internal at the FBI that labeled Catholics who pray the rosary as extremists? Somebody's fingers, wasn't AI, somebody's fingers typed that memo. Who was it? Well, maybe again we can let ourselves wonder, what if we find out who these people are? Now, the January 6th Fedsurrection was obviously staged. Which agencies staged it and which people in those agencies plotted it and executed it or looked the other way while it was happening? What if the next attorney general uncovered the truth? We actually know the names of some of the government officials who colluded with the big tech platforms to censor us and silence us, to ban us if we talked about COVID or vaccines or transgenderism or January 6th. Remember when we weren't even allowed to send via DM on what was then Twitter the link to the Hunter Biden laptop story because the government had told Twitter it's Russian disinformation, even though everyone involved knew that it wasn't? What if those people in government who lied to big tech and used big tech as a way to try to wiggle around the legal requirement that government not infringe on people's First Amendment right to free speech, but you also, by the way, can't, as a government official, use a private entity to do your dirty work for you? What if those people actually were held accountable? What about the people who signed off on the Mar-a-Lago raid? Or or Alvin Bragg, for goodness sake, Fonnie Willis, Letitia James. These are not just quote-unquote enemies of President Trump that he shouldn't have his Department of Justice target because they're his political opposition. No. These are people, politicians, who committed crimes because they hate Trump. And when someone commits a crime, they should be held accountable for it. Like Roy Singham, funding the left-wing riots across the country. Those things are not grassroots. They're not organic. They are paid for by a man who shares an office in Shanghai, China, with a Chinese Communist Party propaganda firm. A man who attended a Chinese Communist conference and took notes in a notebook, a red notebook with a hammer and sickle on the front, who is an avowed Leninist. He's not allowed to be a pawn for the Chinese Communist Party and literally pay for violence in the United States because that's what the Chinese Communist Party wants, civil unrest. Just imagine, you can let yourself imagine again. What if Ilhan Omar was actually investigated because it's quite obvious that her naturalized citizenship was obtained under false pretenses because her father lied and didn't disclose that he was a member of the violent Marxist Siad Barre regime, whom he claimed was trying to kill him when he sought asylum here. Well, if he lied, which he did, then his asylum claim was invalid, which it was, which means Ilhan Omar, his daughter's naturalized citizenship, is also invalid. What if she were investigated? What if Zohran Mamdani was investigated? He's also a naturalized citizen who praised terrorists before he was naturalized. Did he disclose that on his naturalization application? Maybe with the right candidate at the Department of Justice, maybe we'd find that out. And we wouldn't just have to ask the question. Maybe we would actually see the truth. And of course, the same with the Epstein files. Maybe we'd actually learn what happened to Epstein that night in prison and what corruption surrounded his death and how he made his money and which political entities, politicians and intel agencies and countries and governments he was associated with and who made the decisions to let him off easy. Maybe we'll actually find that out with a new attorney general. It feels like a dam has been released because we went from enthusiastic, excited, and hopeful at President Trump's inauguration to 14 months later, we're just demoralized. Because none of what we had been promised when it comes to justice had been delivered. And now it's just like a resurgence of this enthusiasm. What's going to happen next? After 400 days of walking through that desert, what will it be? Again, I want to thank the president. I want to thank President Trump for listening to his base and understanding why we want justice, why we need justice, and why we want an attorney general who is based and savage and committed to the America First agenda, who wants to prosecute criminals who tried to hurt you, Mr. President, and hurt us because we voted for you. make sure you tune into the show next week. Again, we have something special planned for you Monday, but Tuesday we're going to do a deeper dive into the strengths and the weaknesses or the vulnerabilities of the people who are currently being reported as the top tier list of options for President Trump to nominate as the next Attorney General of the United States. Okay, it's extremely late in the evening for us to be sitting here together. I'm really glad that you tuned in. This is a very important topic. It's a very significant day because of everything that we just talked about. Nothing personal against Pam Bondi, but we cannot let the rest of the Trump administration go by without demanding justice. Demanding justice. Okay. We'll tease that on Monday. We have something else. We have something else going on for you on Tuesday, which Spencer's reminding me about. And I don't remember the logistical details of it, so I'll tell you about it on Monday. So Monday we have our show. Tuesday we have something special for you in the afternoon. Then we'll do our deep dive. It's going to be a good week. Make sure you're subscribed. YouTube.com/Liz Wheeler. X.com/Liz_Wheeler. On Spotify, we are the Liz Wheeler Show. Find us on there. Subscribe. Give us a 5-star review. And make sure you share this episode far and wide. Far and wide. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is the Liz Wheeler Show.